the home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuga Online, your inspiration radio station.
Hi there, and welcome to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. Thanks so much for all your messages this week. And yes, and for reaching out on social media. I do appreciate that. As you know, Healthcare Hour is all about healthcare professionals. It's all about us understanding that they are people, they get tired, they get hungry. It's also about us improving the relationship between the healthcare professional and the patient, and of course the patient's family. And for us as the public to be educated, for us to know what's happening out there, and for us to have autonomy over our own health and our own bodies. My guest today, who you will meet after the break, is quite a different topic for today. And it's something that I found quite fascinating. So I thought, let me ask all these questions and help us all understand how this works. But let's go for that break.
The home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
Countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuga Online, your inspiration radio station.
Welcome back. You're listening to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. My guest today is Stasha Jordan, and she is joining us as the Executive Director of the South African Breast Milk Reserve. So hi, Stasha, welcome.
Hi, Colleen. Thanks for having us.
Yes, so tell us more. Well, first of all, let's hear more about you, because Stasha is quite an unusual name. For the listeners, you'll see that it is spelled S-T-A with a squiggly little S and an A. Tell us more about you.
So I'm the founder and executive director of the South African Breast Milk Reserve. The South African Breast Milk Reserve was established when I was a master's student at the University of Pretoria. I was focusing on policy implementation design. Here we're talking about public policy, and I was becoming a mom, and I had my own baby, who's now 22 years old. So he was my inspiration. And so we set about human milk banking in 2003. And the reason we set out to collect donated breast milk was that I was doing research pertaining to the policy guidelines of feeding of infants that were born to HIV-exposed mummies, and what were the interventions at the time that were supporting this very, very vulnerable population group. So human milk banking was but baby at the time in the country. We had small community-based human milk banks, and we became part of that community through the work of the South African Breast Milk Reserve that is now 22 years old.
Okay, so fascinating. So you and I were chatting before the show, and my idea was that if you had excess breast milk, and then you very quickly corrected me to say, no, we all have excess breast milk.
Yes,
so
indeed.
Talk us through that.
The more you express, the more you produce. The science of breastfeeding is very clear. Our volumes of breast milk grow with demand, and the only hindrance to breastfeeding, or one of the biggest hindrances to breastfeeding, is convincing mothers that they're not good enough, that they do not have enough breast milk, that they will struggle with supply, that their milk is not going to be good enough. And I just want to call bullshit on that today. I must tell your listeners very clearly, you are good enough. You have enough breast milk. It is just about how much you express and how regularly you express that breast milk that allows you to build a stash of breast milk in your freezer. But primarily premature babies that are born early and mommies who are not able to breastfeed them orally at the breast will find themselves in a place where they have to express breast milk for the baby in the neonatal intensive care unit. So we have to be very careful that we communicate clearly to the mom that she is good enough, that her breast milk is good enough, and that her effort is all that matters. And oftentimes society places itself in the intersection between mother and baby because it will suggest that she's not competent enough, capable enough, that her breast milk isn't nutritious enough. And those are not truths. Those are partly insidious forms of marketing for artificial feeds, and in other parts, cultural interference. So we really call upon all gogos, grannies, and family members to support breastfeeding women, because it is through your support that mothers can and they do produce more than enough breast milk.
Okay. All right. And so what also, like, one of those urban legends, just thinking about it, is sometimes when you have a big baby, then they'd say to mommy, oh, you're not going to have enough milk to feed this big baby. But as you said, the more the baby drinks, the more you're going to produce.
Those are very, very old urban legends
Yes.
that would also want you to start feeding this baby porridge at 3 weeks, or very random initiations of feeding that are not advised and not adequate. So babies must be exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months of life. No matter what size the baby is, the baby will latch on your breast and the baby will suck out the amount of breast milk that is needed and required. What perhaps moms are not accustomed with is the reality that babies will and do cry, and that is their communication method. That doesn't necessarily speak to the fact that they're not receiving enough nutrition. That does not necessarily speak to the quality of your breast milk. That is the general experience of parenting. And I believe that perhaps in 2025, not everyone is accustomed to these realities surrounding parenting, that it's not going to be an easy journey, that it does not look like in the ads, that your baby will keep you up at night, that your baby will be crying, will be demand feeding, will be requiring a lot from you. And oftentimes it's first-time mommies that struggle with this coming to terms. And obviously as elders of society, our role is to ensure that they feel competent and capable enough to support their babies with donated breast milk. Why? Because when you don't exclusively breastfeed your baby, you're putting your baby at higher risk of mortality and morbidity, meaning that babies that are not exclusively breastfed in the first 6 months of life face a 600% higher chance of demising, meaning mortality. They face a high chance of gastrointestinal and respiratory disease, and all other forms of disease that impact newborns and babies in the first 1,000 days. But breastfeeding in South Africa, beyond that, is also an important form of food security that needs to be empowered, so that mothers who live in poverty or that live outside of means which would allow them to artificially feed, even though we do not encourage mothers with means to artificially feed, and we want to encourage them to promote food security for their children and exclusively breastfeed.
Okay, so the South African Breast Milk Reserve, do you get involved, obviously storing the milk, all those kind of things, but do you also get involved? I hear that you do advocate for breastfeeding. Do you get involved as well with teaching mommies how to breastfeed?
Yes, absolutely. So first and foremost, just to give you a bit of background, human milk banking is an activity that takes place at the hospital level as well as in a centralized reserve. At the hospital level, we run 25 in-hospital human mukbangs in the neonatal intensive care units of South Africa. And we supply donated breast milk to 160 neonatal ICUs, both public and private, nationwide. If you run a human mukbang, you can only, the first job that we have as human mukbangers is to promote breastfeeding. Because without breastfeeding promotion, breast milk donation is not a possible reality. So how does this work in a neonatal intensive care unit? Is that moms that are giving birth and are lodging with their babies will be on site and visiting the babies every 3 hourly to express. Once we optimize lactation for the mom, and there we have our own human milk bankers offering lactation support, as you mentioned, to the mothers, we are then able to harvest some of the healthy breast milk that is in oversupply, and to make sure that after following important quality checkpoints, we are able to feed it safely to babies whose mommies have demised, babies that are orphaned, babies whose moms are too ill to lactate for a short period of time, because most restrictions to breastfeeding are limited to a small period of time when either the mom herself is in hospital and not conscious, or has to be brought back on board through lactation stimulation. So yes, we do a lot of breastfeeding promotion. Our primary role is to be breastfeeding advocates and activists.
All right. So on that advocates and advocacy of us speaking about it, let's go for a break. When we're going to come back, we're going to find out more about the details. How do we go about it? What do we need to do? Let's go for that break.
How do you know the life of personal coach you're about to work with is who they say they are? How do you know if they can do the job? At the Africa Board for Coaching, Consulting and Coaching Psychology, we can tell you. So, before you share your secrets and spend your money, check with us first. Visit www.abccccp.com or call us on 012-751-7608. The ABCCP, the professional body for coaches.
Welcome back. You're listening to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. My guest today is Tasha Jordan. She is the Executive Director of the South African Breast Milk Reserve. And Stasha has been talking to us about how we need to advocate for all women breastfeeding. They have made the rules about breastfeeding much stronger.
Yes.
You know, my daughter's nearly 28, and I remember, where she was in ICU, and it was, we'll just top up with, what did you call that, alternative milk?
Formula.
I didn't know if
Yes.
I was allowed to call it that. Yes. And so they would just give her a bottle of something else in the middle of the night. And it's like, no, guys, come
Yes.
here. Yes.
Yeah, your generation of women was victim of the first rollout of the aggressive marketing of formula. And what formula companies would do at the time is that they would have breastfeeding nurses that were not nurses, but were reps. And they would be going from bed to bed, encouraging you, my mom, and a lot of women of older generations, or the women that were giving birth in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, let's say, to, in fact, formula feed. They would also donate funding for hospitals to set up nurseries away, far removed from maternity, so that there would be an excuse for top-up in between. Now, what is the risk? Let's talk about why human milk banking matters, because, I think for the listeners, a lot of the times people think, it's a nice to have. If the baby can have breast milk, that's great. But if the baby can't, that's good anyway. No, that is not the case. Human milk contains over 90 ingredients. It's a live milk. It's a biological organism that supports early life development. It is not a one-dimensional dehydrated food that you reconstitute with water. Now, what happens when a baby is born extremely low birth weight? Because human milk banking targets a population group of extremely low birth weight babies. So our client is born weighing 500 grams, whereas most full-term babies are born weighing between 2 and 3.5 kilos. Smaller babies are just under 2 kilos, and babies below 37-week gestation, which is our area of focus, are at high risk of a condition known as necrotizing enterocolitis. And necrotizing enterocolitis is an infection of the ileum, and which is a portion of the gut, which leads to the blocking, bloating, and perforating of the gut. When this happens, large portion of the gut must be removed. Necrotizing enterocolitis is the second biggest killer in the premature population, and it is directly associated with artificial feeding. Now, your breast milk, your mom's own milk is the priority, because mom's own milk is the immunological library that will save your baby's life. Mom's own milk is full of the right enzymes, hormones, and nutrients that you will never find in dehydrated formula feeds. Now, when a baby succumbs to necrotizing enterocolitis, we're not talking only about the heartbreaking cost of life, because we are losing a life, but we're also talking about lengthy stays in the neonatal intensive care unit, which is probably one of the most costlier healthcare services. Much needed, but we do not want babies in palliative care for 3 months facing the risk of death. So it is really important to emphasize that this is not because we want to be fabulous and give breast milk to other babies that are not our own. It is like donated blood to a critical care patient. It is like donated blood to an obstetric mother that has a complication in pregnancy. You know, if we think about blood donations, a large portion of blood donations are in fact earmarked for obstetric care and for the care of newborns and mothers. And in the same way, donated breast milk maintains the integrity of the gut. It's an emergency intervention aimed at protecting the baby postpartum in the first 2 weeks of life. How does that apply to your full-term baby? In the same exact way. If breast milk saves a premature baby's life and it improves the outcomes of this very vulnerable baby on life support, imagine what it can do for yours, what it can do for... There are over 60 pathologies in life that are associated with a lack of breastfeeding, from type 2 diabetes to late onset cancer or childhood cancer, childhood cancer, late onset diabetes, or all manner of conditions that are directly associated with the lack of this very important aspect of being a mammal amongst mammals, because we suckle from the mammary gland, and that accounts for the size of our brains, our cognitive capacity, but also the ability of babies to reach the age of 5. Because babies that are exclusively breastfed are more likely to make it to their 5th birthday and beyond. And that is really what we want to see amongst our children.
Okay, so powerfully put. I think it's, I think a lot of us have been brainwashed over the years about, oh, but, you know, nice to have. And I think also, you know, as you said, with the whole HIV story, a lot of mommies would be, oh, my baby can't have somebody else's milk, can only have my milk or milk out of its in.
Yeah, no, but talking about the quality procedures, because we
Yes.
want to reassure everyone that is listening that donated breast milk is safe. And how is donated breast milk made safe? So mothers that donate breast milk usually reach us through our website. Our website is www.sabr.org.za, and they can sign up using our online form. Once we collect breast milk from the mummies, we dispatch nurses that test mummies for HIV, hepatitis, and syphilis on sign up. Once we collect the breast milk is quarantined, and we do microbiological monitoring for total colonies, coliforms, and staphylococcus. Once the breast milk passes the first line of controls, it is then moved into the pasteurization process. And pasteurization is a cooking method that implies that we bring the breast milk to 62.5 degrees, we maintain the temperature for half an hour, and we rapidly cool the milk. What does pasteurization do? Pasteurization destroys all lipid envelope viruses and bacteria. HIV, HTLV, cytomegalovirus are all lipid envelope viruses, and those are the most concerning pathogens that we want to as well as some bacterial contaminations that we want to keep at bay. The breast milk is then frozen and it's distributed frozen. So, we have a really, really airtight check mechanism to make sure that our donated breast milk is safe and of the highest quality. Also, donated breast milk is sourced from a pool of mothers that are not taking a lot of medications. And so the exclusion criteria are noteworthy, and they speak to the high quality of breast milk that we enter into the health system.
Okay, so that's how you would donate. The mommy would go onto your website, she'd fill in forms. She would express, obviously you teach mommies how to express and how to store, we've often heard about milk being kept in the fridge.
Yes, absolutely. So, but you know what, we actually don't teach ourselves directly because there is a cadre of healthcare professionals, and I really suggest you interview them as well. Board
Yes.
certified lactation consultants that are healthcare professional, nurses, dietitians that have done an intensive training in breastfeeding support and promotion. So oftentimes moms that are already expressing because they're going back to work will contact us and will give us their extra supply. Oftentimes we've had moms, we've supported moms in solving their problems by referring them to the right healthcare professional. So we work as part of a large network of breastfeeding activists and healthcare professionals that understand the complications that arise from breastfeeding. We like to say that breastfeeding is natural at the right temperature,
Just comes
out,
naturally. You don't need
it's
any
on
input.
tap. But the reality actually is that whilst breastfeeding may be natural, it does not always come naturally.
Yes.
If that makes sense. It's almost
I
like
100% agree.
and we are so vulnerable to, like you mentioned, to external input, to somebody looking at us the wrong way, or somebody suggesting that our milk is not good enough, or that we don't have enough of it, or the baby is too big, or the hips are too small. I think the whole way along the pregnancy journey, there is some type of somebody trying to give you advice on how you should do it, how to do it best, which is wonderful, but it can be very confusing for mummies. So it is really important for moms to know that if you are struggling with your latch, if your nipple is black and bleeding, that's not normal in the sense of that's not what we want to see, but it's not abnormal for you to be having that experience. And it is something that can be corrected with the right support. Get that support. Don't give up. It is such a big, a lot of moms feel so validated. For instance, we have a lot of moms that donate and they learn, they will get in touch with us, and before they've given birth to their second baby, and they'll say, I've seen your ad on social media. I would like to donate. I would like to register now, but I wasn't able to produce enough milk with my first baby. So the first people we put them in touch with is a lactation consultant, somebody to assist them with the right kind of breast pump to fit their breasts. And then what happens is that when they start donating, because they're oversupplying breast milk, they actually also create an oversupply for their own baby, which means that moms that donate breast milk oftentimes have a much more nourishing and fulfilling breastfeeding journey, because they are able to extend their breastfeeding journey a lot longer than they initially anticipated, especially considering, societal inputs, and are able to save many lives. Some of our donors have donated as many as 900 bottles of breast milk throughout their donation journey and saved over 50 lives. One mom, 50 lives, including
Yes.
her own baby. I think it's a beautiful thing. I mean,
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
really
totally.
think
A
about
bit
it.
like the blood stories, But
Yeah,
it's also as well, just before we go for the next break, it's also saying, the same as blood. If blood's not there when you need it, chances are you're never going to need it again. And
yes,
the same with human breast milk, in
breast
that
milk. Yeah,
if it's not there when you need it,
yeah.
yes,
You can
so very
die.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go for a break. We'll be back. I want to hear things like, how long can you keep breast milk for? But we'll go for the break first.
The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is a professional development center for professionals who aim to improve their professional standing. This means that the learning programs we run are more than just academic programs. They are work-based programs that focus on leveraging your current experience as a professional to build your overall profile. A year down the line, the Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is developing into a preferred center for professional development in Pretoria, with 8 professional development faculties including accounting, teaching, entrepreneurship, as well as IT and many more. For more information, go to acwbl.org or dial +27 12 751 7608. The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning, where work is learning.
Welcome back. You're listening to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. My guest today is Stasha Jordan. She is the Executive Director of the South African Breast Milk Reserve. And we've been hearing all interesting facts about breastfeeding. But now, if we imagine this human milk bank, what does it look like? Is it shelves? Is it rows and rows of, I'm picturing what it looks like in there.
A breast milk bank is a clean laboratory, like a milk kitchen in a hospital, with freezers, pasteurizers, and fridges. And that really is the hardware that you'll find in the systems. You'll have temperature mapping devices, you will have testing systems, so for your quality measures and so on. Usually it is adjacent to the neonatal intensive care unit. I will send you some YouTube videos of what the human milk bank looks like.
Okay.
On the hospital level, however, more than a look, it's an activity. And this is what I always like to remind all of us as we work towards World Breastfeeding Week, that it's not about talking about breastfeeding, but it is about practicing breastfeeding. Whether you are a mommy with a newborn or expecting a newborn, or a healthcare professional supporting a mother to breastfeed, mothers must be supported in the activity of establishing lactation. So our human milk bankers are work between 7 and 4 and support the moms that are lodging at the hospitals that come every 3 hourlies to express and support those moms to breastfeed. So the activity of human milk banking is really what stands out in the ward, because it is both breastfeeding support and psychosocial support for moms that are going through a really difficult time. Oftentimes, having a premature baby in the neonatal ICU is a really trying time for parents, and it's a really challenging time, especially for the biological mom that is contending with, a broken pregnancy dream, because there is that aspect that has to be recognized, changing hormonal profiles and all the hustle and bustle of postpartum, but compounded by the fact that we have this extremely tiny baby that is so vulnerable and everyone is very stressed. So that's what the human milk bank looks like. The donated breast milk is distributed frozen. So donated breast milk is collected frozen, and it's maintained in temperature mapped environments, meaning that we digitally map those fridges and freezers, and it is stored 6 months for preterm babies in the freezers and 12 months for full-term babies. However, for expression, if you are expressing for a human milk bank today, you have to freeze within 24 hours from expression. Rather than leaving the milk for 48 hours in the fridge, we want to express and freeze within 24 hours and make sure that your freezers remain frozen even during times of load shedding. So if you do have a stash of breast milk because you are going back to work, we always encourage you to give, because it's in giving that we receive. And if you do part with some of it, you'll see there'll be a lot more to come, because you have now established lactation, you have overcome your own limiting beliefs, you have this freezer that is overflowing with milk and you don't know what to do about it. And oftentimes what happens is that we see mommies lose it because they kept it for too long. After 6 months, you also cannot donate it anymore. So if you do have breast milk in your freezers under 3 months or under 5 months, we'd say, please do get in touch, because we definitely know how to put it to good use.
Excellent. So we know, okay, so you can keep it for 6 months for tiny preterm babies, and for 12 months for full term.
Correct.
Even if you are breastfeeding at home, your own baby, and you're wanting to keep your milk, what should you keep your milk in?
So BPA-free containers are the priority. So you don't have to buy fancy storage containers. Now there are so many variations of breastfeeding packets. But if it is a good BPA-free packet, plastic container, or glass jar, then that is an adequate storage container. We discourage the use of ice cube trays that do not have a lid, because those ice cube trays then can be exposed to environmental contaminants.
Okay, because I've also seen packets, but obviously they're special packets.
The breastfeeding bags, they're called breastfeeding packets. Yes, absolutely. There is a variety of breastfeeding packets, but sometimes, and I mean, we love all the guys who produce breastfeeding packets, but sometimes moms complain that breastfeeding packets can be very expensive. So nothing stops you from using a BPA-free Ziploc bag. Okay, it does not have to be a fancy packaging, but the most important thing is that it has to be BPA free. And I'm just going to get for us what BPA free means, because I forget the acronym. But BPA free means, hold on. Okay, it'll come up. I will let you know as. Okay, it means
of course, it's escaping us now.
Of course, it's escaping us now. But as it comes back, I will let you know.
Okay. And then everybody else is saying, BPA stands for, come on now. Yes.
Typically, just as you want to find
I'm sure
out.
my audience doesn't know what BPA stands for. Yes. All right. And then your units, the 25 units that you have, are they in government hospitals?
Yes, we have human milk banks in public hospitals, and we also supply the private hospitals.
Okay, so you do supply them as well. And then
yes, absolutely.
Is a mommy having to pay, you know, when we look at access to, is a mommy then having to pay for breast milk?
Yes, so donated breast milk is cost recovered in the public sector. The Department of Health pays for donated breast milk, because they set up human milk banks and they cover the processing costs as well as the consumables. In the private sector, the breast milk is charged in line with private sector billing requirements, which is generally to the client. So a liter of breast milk costs around 1,500 Rand. A liter of breast milk is usually distributed in 10 100 ml containers, and these containers feed one premature baby for first week of feeding. The second week of feeding is 1.5 liters, and usually the guidelines is that babies receive donated breast milk for a maximum period of 2 weeks, and then mom has to supply her own milk. However, we also like to remind anybody that has a premature baby and has prescribed donated breast milk that the prescription is a day-by-day prescription, because every day we have to assess your lactation as the mom of the recipient, and you have to now come on board and supply donated breast milk for your own baby. So more or less, I would say it's a R1 per ml of breast milk. And in the global context of human milk banking, we have a very not-for-profit model. Whereas in the United States, this is a profit-driven, oftentimes pharmaceutical initiative that might seem more exploitative. Here we are trying to recover the costs of serological monitoring and quality processes.
Yes. And so people often don't understand not-for-profit. They imagine not-for-profit is free, but not-for-profit is actually covering your costs. Yes.
No. Not-for-profit implies that we are not a private entity with shareholders that receive dividends. Not-for-profit means that, and public benefit means that we have the greater good of our target population in mind as the top priority. But it is absolutely essential for us to be able to cost recover, because contrary to popular belief, this is a very resource-intensive exercise that requires a lot of laboratories, a lot of consumables, a lot of electricity, a lot of storage facilities, fridges, freezers. So, if you imagine that departments of health invest 1 to 1.5 million rand to set up a human milk bank, and something like 300,000 rand to run human milk banks a year, you must also appreciate that, like blood banks, we are not-for-profit companies. Our interest is the public, and it is the baby, but we need to be sustainable to continue doing our work.
Yes. Okay, so thanks so much, Stasha. It's certainly, I speak for myself. I didn't imagine that there were human milk banks, so good to hear about that. And in closing, what's your message for the public, for any mommies out there?
My message for the public is that it is absolutely important, first and foremost, to exclusively breastfeed your babies as your political stance. You want to protect your children. You also want to fill them with your genetic material, and you want to make sure that they benefit from that immunological library that is stored in your breast milk. When you do have excess breast milk, we encourage you to donate it, because when you donate breast milk, you save a life.
Thank you so much.
Just a quick note.
Yes.
Just a quick note. BPA is a chemical commonly found in plastics and resins, and that's the name of the chemical.
Yes. Thank you so much. All right. So
thank you so much, Colleen.
Thank you so much to Stasha for joining us, for helping us understand more about breast milk, the fact that breast is best. We need to be breastfeeding our babies, and also that excess milk that you may have in the freezer, they would very much welcome it as a donation. So remember that you're loved, you matter, and you're not alone. And we'll see you all again next week.
The home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
Countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
Views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuga Online, your inspiration radio station.